with us today. So I just hit record there now, so it should flash up on all your screens. So the recording will be made available to yourselves as well as attendees. So hopefully there'll be some learning here, and particularly, I suppose, around the two talks. You know, if there's something in Siobhan's element about recognition of prior learning that you want to maybe look at again or share with somebody, if this sparks very much in your mind, that would be really useful for Johnny, who's in the youth club, or Mary, who has, you know, run the older people's group, or somebody who's in a caring role. Then, you know, share it with them so that they are able to get that information and contact with Siobhan to start their kind of journey towards getting qualifications for their experience. And equally then, you know, with Isobel's talk, if you're part of a group and something that she says kind of rings true around our culture and our approach, then, you know, share that out and actually just make sure that people are aware of it and maybe are thinking slightly differently, because yeah, I suppose after COVID, a lot of things are going to change and people have a lot of decisions to make. You know, maybe lots of people managed over this past year without members of group, or not managed perfectly fine, not out giving of their time quite so much. So, you know, what will take them back is that kind of organizational culture piece. So, it's volunteer week, as I'm sure you're all aware because you're here, but we have a host of events going on this week. We have any amount of things, and we'd be delighted to see any of you joining us for any of the other sessions, or equally, if you know somebody who might enjoy some of the sessions, just to share the details out with them. Coming up this evening, we have a session on storytelling. I suppose for this year, for National Volunteer Week, the focus we took was environment and well-being. So the well-being piece is this: it's kind of recognizing the experience, looking at the organizational culture stuff, but then we have environmental stuff coming in as well. So we had a talk this morning on sustainable production, basically, and it ties in very neatly with Penny's being opened this week, I think. You know, basically fast fashion not being the solution to the world's problems. Then we have other talks going on over the course of the week on, you know, how to protect the bees. We have stuff on cooking. We have things on social media for charity shops. We have a storyteller in this evening. We're doing a talk tomorrow night about pirates. You know, so it's kind of an eclectic mix of everything, but I suppose that reflects the nature of the clientele that we work with. You know, our volunteers are not one size fits all. Everybody comes for their own reasons and comes for with their own story. So we try to offer something over the course of Volunteer Week that will resonate with everybody, and something that, you know, that people will engage with and people will enjoy. So look, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Siobhan Murray from the Donegal ETB and let you share your screen and start your presentation, Siobhan, and then we'll break for questions for a moment or two, and then we'll go to Isobel. But at the end, I think you are both with us for the hour, so at the end, if you have any questions or thoughts or anything, feel free to chip in. Okay, Siobhan, thank you.
All right, thank you, John, for that, and welcome everybody. I'm just going to share my screen with you all now. There we go. And okay, so as John mentioned, my name is Siobhan Murray. I'm from the Donegal ETB, and I'm the coordinator of the Recognition of Prior Learning programme. So what is RPL? RPL stands for, as I said, Recognition of Prior Learning, but what it does is it values the learning that's already taken place in your workplace, whether that's paid or unpaid or in life. I suppose we're all learning all the time. We're picking up skills, and we're living in the age of information. We're reading our books. We're looking up YouTube videos. I learned to do a 3-point car turn on YouTube one time. John's laughing, yeah. So I suppose those things are all coming together, and that's what we're actually looking at, okay? So what we're saying with RPL is we're saying, look, if you already have the skills, then why would you want to go and sit in a course to learn it all over again? Because that's going to be, one, a waste of your time, but it also undervalues the skills that you've learned in your workplace through previous mentoring or your own self-learning. I suppose what's important to note is I would be working with an awful lot of carers. John mentioned this already, people that are working 10, 15, 20 years in a given sector. And they initially, when they started working as carers, they didn't need a qualification, but that has since changed and now they do. So they're being expected to take 9 months out of work to go back into class, to learn what they already know, where we know that they're actually training up new people that are actually coming into the centre. So that's really unfair. So that's what really RPL is about. And we hope my talk today will maybe spark you into thinking, yeah, that maybe this could be something that would be of value and benefit to yourselves as well, that we could quantify the skills that you've learned through your volunteer work and give you a qualification for that. Why not? Okay, so who's RPL for? It's for people like yourselves that are skilled workers who've gained the knowledge, skills and competencies in their workplace and in their wider lives. We take examples from your last 5 years of working. So, you know, even if you might be out of work or you've been volunteering for the last 5 years, you can use all of those examples. They're all very relevant. So you can apply for either, we can give you a major award, what we call a major award, which would be 8 modules in total, or you can apply for 1 award. We don't discriminate against anybody. We might have people coming in that maybe that are looking to finish off, you know, maybe childcare, and they were able to do a few awards a couple of years ago, and now they're looking to finish off. Or we have people that are coming in to do the actual full thing. So you're not discriminated, is really what I'm trying to say. You can decide which award you want to go for, and we'll see if we can get you RPL in that. So really, the minor award is 15 credits, or the full award would be 8 modules at 120. That totals up 120 credits. Okay, so how can you achieve your actual award? Well, I don't know if any of you have done any modules with the ETB, or you've done any QQI awards, but each of them are made up of learning outcomes. And what we do with the learning outcomes then, I suppose, if you go into a classroom setting, this is what you're going to know, this is what you're going to learn in the classroom, and then you do an assignment at the end of it to prove that you know it. Whereas with RPL, what we're saying is, you already know this, you already have your learning outcomes already sorted. But in order to achieve your qualification through RPL, we ask for a response from you for each learning outcome, but we help you with that. So how do you achieve this? Your response then will focus to each learning outcome, and it's based on your own learned experience. And there are various ways that you can respond. And what we do is we gather that into what we call a portfolio of evidence. So portfolio of evidence then contains various documents. You could put in a CV there, you could put in any formal qualifications, or maybe you did some work-based training certificates that would back up your evidence. You might talk about tasks that you completed at work, at home, or in the community. You might decide to, instead of that, you mightn't want to actually write out your answer, that you just pick up your phone and talk into it and just record your answer. Or you might do maybe a wee video demonstration. For example, just as was mentioned in the care skills, there's one module that asks them to demonstrate proper hand hygiene. So I would be encouraging people, look, rather than writing out the steps to that, why don't you just pick up the phone and record how you actually do the different stages of hand washing, because then it's simpler and you're not having to write an awful lot of words for that either. And it's also creative. We also ask for photographs as well that can demonstrate that you're able to do something, or you might include samples of workplace documents to back it up as well. And then there is a response to a brief. So you're not left on your own with a list of learning outcomes and told, right, off you go now, gather up evidence for those. We'll actually give you a brief with a set of tasks, reflection tasks for you that will act as a guide and a support for you to be thinking about what evidence you might actually need. What's important to note is that your RPL portfolio is not like anything that's produced in the classroom. When you go to sit in a taught module, a lot of the answers would be the same because that's what you've learned in the classroom, okay? Whereas your RPL portfolio is your lived evidence. And if you and I were to sit down and do the exact same module, your portfolio is going to look completely different to my portfolio, because we've got different experiences, we've got different personalities, we've got different ways of working, we're meeting different people. So that's why the portfolios are all unique as the individuals that are actually doing them. And then what's important to note as well is that all awards are equal in the sense that you can't compare, like there's no difference between somebody getting an award in the classroom and somebody getting an award in RPL. They're all exactly the same, okay? So you're still just getting your QQI award, whatever it is. Okay, so you're going to get, as part of the process, as I said, when you're building your portfolio of evidence and you're given your brief, you actually get a mentor with this that's going to work with you on a one-to-one basis. And what she does is, or he, they help you to build your portfolio of evidence on a one-to-one basis. They act as your guide and they support you with the building, and it's on a one-to-one, as I said, but there might be workshops where we would put a group of you together, say if you were doing youth work and it was to do with health and safety, that we might decide, okay, well, let's do this all together so that you can help each other and support each other as well. Or we might find that, look, you might need a wee bit of help with this, so we would need to bring you together. But it's usually on a one-to-one basis. I suppose in the current climate, what's actually happening is that that's done now over the phone or online. Prior to COVID, you would be asked to come into a centre, but people are liking the actual one-to-one support over the phone because, again, it's not like a course in the sense that you have to come into a centre. You just make an appointment with your mentor. Your mentor makes an appointment with you to a suitable time that suits you, and they ring you up and they guide you that way and support you. Okay, so for an RPL award, then it's really important to remember this is not a course, folks. You're not asked to come into the centre, as I said, at a certain time. You're not learning anything, because what you're doing through the RPL is you're proving that you already know this. But then it's important to let you know that your RPL portfolio goes through exactly the same quality assured process as any programme within the ETB. And what that means is, when you're finished your portfolio with your mentor, you'll say, right, that's ready now to go into assessment. And we get a subject matter expert to assess your work. They will score it, and then it comes back to us and we do an internal verification to make sure that the assessor has done a good job. And then that goes outside to an external assessor to make sure that the internal assessor did a good job. And then the final stamp of approval then is through our certified approval board. So you can see that there's quite a few layers there to make sure that you have a really sound qualification at the end of this. Okay, so I was thinking when John invited me today to be part of the National Volunteers Week, what types of awards might be relevant for volunteers? So I was looking, somebody might be volunteering in a charity shop, so you could be looking at maybe doing the level 4, level 5 retail skills. That's a minor award, but it's also a major award as well. You could be volunteering in an office skills, or there might be skills there within your organisation that you might be building up, I suppose, knowledge and competencies there that would be relevant for that major award in office skills, but it's also a minor award. Some of you might be working in community development. There's a QQY level 5 award there. As John mentioned, there's a level 5 youth work that might be relevant to some people. And then the minor awards that we would be looking at is communications, personal effectiveness, work experience, teamwork, and those last 4 that I've mentioned. I suppose what's important to note is that these would be considered soft skills or human skills, and employers are really looking for those at the minute for their staff to actually have. And I suppose what I'm finding with the RPL is that people might write down and they would say to me, well, you know, I've got great communication skills. And I would say, well, how do you know? Do you know? Because we can listen out and say, well, I'm good at eye contact and I've got great tone, and, you know, but with the RPL, we're actually looking for you to give us an example. When have you used good communication skills? So what do you think your strengths and your weaknesses are? And what we've noticed is that people now are applying for jobs and they are walking into interviews with those answers tripping off their tongues because they've had to actually sit down and really think about what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what they're good at, what their challenges have been, and I suppose their successes as well. So we're just finding that it's having another added benefit, I suppose, that we didn't actually really foresee, but yet there we are. This is coming to the fore now for us. So it's a really good practice as well for people to actually sit down and be reflective about their own strengths and weaknesses as well. What other supports then as part of our exit strategy, and it doesn't matter if you're doing one award or one minor award or a full award, the ETB does offer guidance services for people, I suppose, to build up their CV, their interview skills, and their course progression as well, if they want to move on to different courses. And I suppose anybody that I've referred to our guidance service, they've actually come back to me and said, Siobhan, these people are well prepared for their interview, because as I just mentioned, they've actually really sat down and thought about what they're good at. Okay, so the next steps then to making, I suppose, if this is something that you're interested in applying for RPL, is to make an application to ourselves. And then once that's approved, then you're given your learner detail form, which is the generic form for anybody coming through the ETB. It's our registration form. And then after that, then you get your mentor that will call you up and make an appointment with you at a suitable time, and they'll get the process started. And you have 6 weeks to complete your module or your brief. But what I can tell you is that we recommend it should only take 10 to 12 hours to complete a module. It's what we call a fast track. And the reason why it's such a short time is because you already know this, and you're just reflecting on what you know, and you're writing it out, or you're taking a wee video, or you're recording your dialogue. But I suppose the mentor really is your best friend throughout this, because you can send them wee drafts along the way. You know, it doesn't have to wait to the end of the 6 weeks that you hand something in. You can take as quickly or as up to 6 weeks if you want, and we allow 6 weeks because we understand that people are working and they've got families and different things going on as well. So we just allow a wee bit of leeway there, I suppose, for our learner-centred approach for everybody as well, that they have a bit of time to do that. But then you can set up and you would say to your mentor, look, I'll have that task finished by the end of next week. I give it to you, and they'll give you feedback on that. So it's very much there's great support there for you so you're not left on your own. So would you apply then? If you send an email to us at the RPL at Donegal ETB and request an application, and please give me your phone details as well, either your mobile number or your landline, because the first stage is I will be calling you, I suppose, for a short interview to see where you're at, what your experience is, and be able to signpost you then to an actual relevant award. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation for today, and I was wondering will I leave the questions, John, until the end? Is that what you would like me to do?
No, if we have a few minutes now, if anybody has any particular questions, could you stop sharing though, Siobhan? Just so we can see each other then.
See, I'll find my mouse. There we go.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
No bother at all. Look, if anybody has any questions, there's a small enough crowd of us here, just unmute and ask. I suppose I have one for you to start the process, Siobhan. So you'll chat to people. So the list that's up there is not exhaustive. So you'll try and find a course that corresponds with the experience that people have.
Correct. Yes, John.
Very good. So it can be any sort of experience. We just picked examples that worked for what the normal work of the volunteer centre, but it's not related.
And that's what I was just thinking. But I suppose we cover all of the QQI modules. Well, okay, there might be one or two that we don't do. For example, those practical courses like anatomy and physiology. Right, because those would be exam-based ones, but there's definitely, we have quite a broad remit of programs that we can cover, and we can cover any level from 3, 4, 5 up to 6 as well.
Great.
Okay, so it just depends on people's experience, but we would help them as well to ascertain which award would be relevant for them to do, because somebody came to me and says, I would really like to get into childcare, but they don't have the experiential learning of working in childcare. I can't give them an award for that. I can only give awards for the experience that people do have.
No, very true. And I suppose, but it is a great opportunity, like you say there, for those carers that have been doing it for 20 years. And I know we've had this conversation in the past where, if you yourself or a loved one was going into care, do you want somebody that's newly qualified with a bit of paper or somebody that's been doing this for 20 years? So, it's great to have that opportunity for those more experienced carers to transfer across and get the qualification without having to spend 9 months and a course learning what they already know.
Yeah.
Can I ask something there, Siobhan, about the length of time it takes to do each type?
Yeah.
There's a short version and a long version. Roughly, how long would it take somebody to complete both of those?
We recommend per module, it should only take John 10, maximum 14 hours.
Okay.
So you could do it over a weekend.
Each module?
If you wanted to. If you wanted to if you like me and your lastminute.com, everybody out of the house. I'm doing my work, right? But that's just how I work, okay? I don't recommend it. But
don't try this at home.
But you could take a wee hour here and a wee hour there. I would be saying to my applicants and anybody, I suppose we call people that are going through the RPL program applicants because you're not learners, you're not students, you're applying for recognition of prior learning. So I would be saying to applicants, I said, look, why don't you take a wee hour here, a wee hour there, take a task, tick it off, and then you'll be flying through those tasks in no time. But they'll have an understanding with their mentor how they work best. I mean, some people will be saying, look, say for example, I'm on night duty now for the next week. There's nothing I can get done there. That's fine. Or somebody might be going on holidays. That's okay too. Take that week, but focus that into your 6-week block that you have. You're given 6 weeks. And it's entirely up to you then how you use those 6 weeks.
Awesome. And the fact that you have a mentor sitting at your back is good too.
It is. And, I suppose when that somebody's going to be ringing you in a few days' time, that does tend to motivate people as well. And I'd be saying to the mentors, because they're working in other areas as well. So they might decide, right, Siobhan, my day for RPL is a Wednesday. Well, then they let their applicants know that Wednesday's their day. So even if somebody sends work through on a Sunday night, they know that they won't get feedback until Wednesday, if that makes sense. So everybody's clear, the communication's open. So no, it's working out very well.
No, that sounds
great program.
Yeah.
Great program. Yeah.
Fantastic opportunity for people to take what they already have and turn it into that bit of paper that is all too needed. Sorry, Siobhan. Yeah.
I know. Well, because you're all working in volunteer, why wouldn't you avail of that? And I suppose like the likes of there's no youth work programs happening at the minute. There's no community development programs happening in the minute. Like there was 10 years ago, they were very popular, but now they're kind of, I suppose, they're not so popular now. So why wouldn't you be applying for those? And then that's going to set you up as well for your jobs, So it's using now the skills that you have and putting that into a piece of paper and getting that.
No, that's very interesting. Anybody, any questions or comments for Siobhan before we move on? No, you've explained it very well. Hopefully you'll have some customers out of this, Siobhan.
You're getting away very late.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody thinks of any questions afterwards, you have my details now. Just give me a shout.
Yeah, that's it. And we'll include those contact details when we send out a link to the session as well. So thank you very much, Siobhan. We're going to hand over now to Isobel McWilliams of DLDC, who has, this is what the volunteer centre offices look like, and look at the delightful background at Isobel. You see where all the money gets spent in the organisation. Eamon had to bring in his own pictures to put up behind him, and I'm stuck with this wallpaper, and look at her with fancy plants. But anyway,
you can all have what I have. It's all available in Zoom. So rather than have my kitchen in the background, you've got this, guys. All right. Can I just get the screen share there? Let me just see if it allows me. Yep. Okay, great. Siobhan, that was great, and I will definitely be in touch with you. My mind's we're in there in terms of how we kind of bring that on the DLDC as well. But I think you might be working with Angela already, aren't you? A little bit in the background there. So yeah, okay, no problem. So let me just try and get this view right. Okay. Okay, so let's see. And I'll try to slideshow it. It's on the beginning. There we go. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Okay, so John, thank you very much for inviting me, both yourself and Eamon, and well done to you both on National Volunteering Week. So I have been asked to provide an insight, as I see it, across my last 25 years, if you like, of being involved with in leadership and management, and particularly from a HR point of view, looking at enhancing the understanding of how we support our staff best, and how we create a support and culture for our volunteers and our staff and organisations, whether that is in a charity shop environment, whether it's in a community centre, whether it's a team of one person maybe being managed, whether it's a team of 10, 20. So I've tried to address the presentation to hopefully an audience that will recognise their model. We have approximately 8,000 organisations in Ireland, and that's across Ireland. And this has really come out of a working conditions and HR best practice document. It's a review of the community and voluntary sector and the state centre. So we're looking at 8,000 organisations, whether those be shops, whether those be organisations like DLDC, whether organisations like ETB. We are supporting 8,000 organisations across Ireland. It's a real hefty part of the workforce. So as it's Volunteer Week, I thought, rather than, don't mean to reinvent the wheel, but I thought I would just maybe touch on some information that was done by Volunteer Ireland, and they used Ipsos Mori to provide some research in 2020. So they looked at pre-COVID, during COVID, and what it might look like post-COVID. And there are 3 classifications of volunteers, and I think it's really important that we look at volunteers. So whilst volunteers are not necessarily an employee, you are vicariously liable for your own actions, your governing body's actions. The governing body is vicariously liable for that volunteer in the charity shop, in the community centre, in the workplace, and I'll touch on that a wee bit later. So there are 3 types of volunteerism. So formal volunteering through a charity or formally organised group, club or organisation. The key distinguishing feature is that the volunteering is provided through formally constituted groups, including registered charities, employers, clubs and societies. Then mutual aid through an informal group set up by people in your area to support and help others in your local community. So very prevalent during COVID. So the key distinguishing feature is that the volunteering is provided through non-constituted groups without legal or charitable statuses. So it's normally your neighbours. So in your community, everybody getting together to provide a Meals on Wheels or an immediate response to picking up those prescriptions, for example, that were much needed during COVID. The category refers specifically to groups on Facebook, WhatsApp, etc., and is set up to support communities or issues in society like COVID. And then there's informal. So informal volunteering is as an individual to help other people outside your family or to support your local community. The key distinguishing feature is that volunteering is provided directly by the individual to the beneficiary, local community environment, and not through any formal group. Okay, so what was volunteer participation like before COVID? And I have no doubt that John Curran and Eamon can quote this chapter and verse off the top of their heads. And there's evidence, physical evidence of knitting and everything else, and DVC at the minute to show this. Okay, so trend-wise, before COVID, we had, I'm just going to hide this video panel so I can see. So volunteer pre-COVID participation was at 43%, according to the research carried out in October 2020. Then there seemed to be a slight decrease in volunteering participation, and John and maybe you can come in at the end of this presentation to give your experiences of that, but a slight decrease in volunteering during COVID to 37%, compared to pre-COVID being the 12 months beforehand. So notably that it was for 7 months comparison. And I imagine, and again, we can discuss it then, but I imagine that might have been the nervousness around lockdown 1. We were really all unsure. We were afraid to go out the door. We were rushed buying our toilet rolls. We were rushed buying all our bleaches and everything else and our hand sanitizers, and people were really frightened. So I imagine that might have been part of it at the very start. And then post-COVID, it is anticipated that volunteering will grow significantly by 19 points from previous 43% to 62% post-COVID. Okay. So what does it look like? What does that look like? So over 6 in 10 respondents expect to volunteer still post-COVID compared to 43% pre-COVID. All forms of expected volunteer participation have seen a significant increase in rates. 40% expect to volunteer formally and versus 27% pre-COVID. 54% expect to volunteer informally or mutually versus 34% pre-COVID. Okay, so a huge growth in the informal volunteer mode after COVID. Okay, so what I wanted to touch on here was, you've probably seen this if you've done any type of business studies or any type of management course, you've probably seen this before. And I want to touch on this because this is really important, whether you are in a professional environment and in a personal environment, and it's really about ourselves. It's human beings. What do we need? And it's an oldie, but it's a goodie. So in 1943, Abraham Maslow defined what he saw as the human hierarchy of needs. Okay, and what he said, starting at the very bottom, is that human beings, in order for them to survive, needed physiological needs. They needed food, they needed water, they needed warmth. Once they had that, so that's the foundation. Once they had that, they move up the pyramid. And then what they need is they need a safe environment. So whether that's a safe work environment, volunteering environment, home environment, they needed security and shelter. Then once they had those two, they moved up the pyramid to find a sense of belonging. So they felt part of a community, part of a family. They felt part of a friend's environment. Okay, so they felt safe again, further safe. Once they had those three, then everybody achieves their mode of self-esteem. Okay, they feel that, yep, I've got there. Yes, I have self-worth. Yes, I have self-belief in myself. And once they have that, they can then start to become experts, if you like. And through their expertise, then they can start to advise others, pay it forward. And as long as they have recognition of that self-esteem as well. And then above all else, and some people stop here, to be honest, they're not career animals. They don't want to drive themselves any further, and they're quite content to sit here, and that's fine. But some people then decide, you know what, I want to go that extra bit. I want to drive myself. I'm not fulfilled until I keep going. And they strive for that perfection model that we never ever reach. Okay. So in terms of a bit of humor, I thought I'd throw a bit of humor into it. There's a more up-to-date model. So our more up-to-date model is still the same. And there was this layer was added a few years back, Wi-Fi. And then a few recent years, they've added the battery life. So any of you have ever had teenagers will know that rather than eat or drink, they'd rather have their phone charged before they would come downstairs to get a bit of breakfast or anything else these days. And then obviously you throw, I'm sure there's going to be a new model coming out that has our masks and our hand sanitizers and everything else in there. So I'm sure there's another layer that's going to be added in there. So before I go into the culture and understanding how we support our staff, I think it's really important that everybody understands that self-esteem piece, that need for, you know, having those sociological needs, that having the roof over our heads, having the food in our bellies, having that the clothes in our back before we do anything else. So how do we support our teams? Okay, what do we need to know? So I focused the presentation on 3 areas, and I genuinely can talk about culture to I'm blue in the face. So I have over 25 years of experience in different industries. So public sector, manufacturing, retail, hospitality, IT, recruitment, obviously third sector as well too, and many roles that I've held over the years. And culture for me is one of the reasons that I either stay with an organization, grow with an organization, or leave an organization. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is. And that culture doesn't matter whether there's a team of 2 of you. It doesn't matter if there's a team of 30. It's just as important. And sometimes, in my experience, I found that it can be more difficult to manage and define culture in a smaller team than a larger team. And I'm happy to take questions on that at the end. But there are 3 areas that I've focused on today. I'm just conscious of time. And the 3 areas that I want to address are, what do we need to know? Well, we need to enhance our understanding of supporting our staff and volunteers as part of an organizational culture that is a key aspect of delivery to the community services. Okay, so we cannot support our community in Donegal or wider if we do not have an understanding of what organizational culture is. Secondly, an organization's environment, or as the younger people like to call it, their vibe, which is also known as culture, is powerful enough to make or break a work experience. And I have found that in larger organizations, or indeed smaller organizations, all it takes is one person to break that vibe, and that vibe is broken for everybody. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Thirdly, it's about understanding our responsibilities to our staff and volunteers, organizations in the community and voluntary sector. And remember, though, 8,000 that are there, even small groups of 2 people can be highly complex in terms of the people agenda, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So let's look at enhancing our understanding of supporting staff and volunteers as part of an organizational culture. So how do we do that? What do we need to look at? Well, firstly, to do that, we need to understand, what does culture mean? So culture is derived from a Latin word, okay? It's colla era, with its root meaning to cultivate. So we need to cultivate something, okay? Culture refers to the universal human capacity to classify and communicate experiences symbolically. So we all want to share, and we all want to define what our experiences are. It's a human need in us. Culture has been called the way of life for an entire society. As such, it includes codes of manners, dress, language, religion, rituals, norms of behaviours, and systems of belief. We talk about the Irish culture, and some of it's stereotypical, I know, but culture is really important, whether it's a country, whether it's an organisation. So, a common way of understanding culture is to see it as consisting of 4 elements that are passed on from generation to generation by learning alone. So this is where your own principles, your own values will come in, okay? So you'll know this, you'll recognise it immediately. So there are 4 ways that you look at culture. So values. So your values comprise ideas about what in life seems important. So each person, each human being has their own set of values. Secondly, norms. So these are the expectations we have and of how we expect people will behave in various situations. So how do they behave at home? How do they behave in a workplace? How do they behave in a voluntary sector? We will have our own personal expectations of that. And then you marry that with your values, your own personal values. Then there are institutions. So these are the structures of a society within which values and norms are transmitted. So, for example, workplaces could be Dáil Éireann, could be it could be an actual community centre. It depends what that structure looks like. And then there are artifacts, okay, of culture. And these are things or aspects of culture that are derived from a culture's values and norms. For example, they're nearly like belongings. The tricolour would be our artifact. The national anthem, the constitution would be our artifacts. So I'm going to look at values and norms. So in terms of values, these comprise ideas about what in life seems important. So try and translate that to your community, your voluntary sector. So culture doesn't appear out of nothing. Okay, so it just doesn't boom, it's there one day. It wasn't there yesterday, but now it's here. Culture must be articulated and communicated throughout an organisation. Culture must be lived by leadership and staff and our volunteers. A positive culture has values that are embedded and known by all, and the values should be branded into all internal and external communications. The governing body, whether that be a board, a management committee, steering committee, whatever that looks like, has a key role to play in safeguarding the values. Values drive conduct, which are behaviours. Conduct drives the culture, and that drives the words and actions that we use. And that conduct-driven, value-driven culture in an organisation is key. Values are spoken, discussed, and referred to in an organisation that is effective, an organisation that has a positive working environment. Values are always spoken, they're always discussed about, they're always referred to. They can be used to challenge behaviours in a respectful way. They can be lived and breathed. They should be visual, they should be seen around your centres, your shops, your offices, your back areas, whatever they look like. They should be seen. Culture it's not something that you can't work on. It's something that you need to sit and reflect on. You need to actually ask yourself, well, what is the culture that I work in? Is it a good culture? Is it not? Could it be better? Am I part of that culture? Am I the reason that culture is the way it is? Is it others? Do I look at myself? Do I blame others for the culture? Is there a void on there, and how do I address it? Okay, I'm happy to take questions on that. I've seen many cultures, just go back on that, I've seen many cultures over the years, and really, genuinely, I truly believe that you should call out behaviours. You should call out where behaviours are not aligning. And there is a real nervousness in organisations, in even personal situations, for individuals to actually find their voice to do that. And some people in organisations, in the voluntary sector, in a work arena, they find it difficult because it's purely lack of knowledge. They're afraid of, what can I say, what can't I say, what is acceptable, what's not acceptable. And all I would advise you on that is, and I use a metaphorical chair, and when people ask me, for example, for training in employment legislation, what I say to them is, I could stand all year and training in employment legislation, but a really quick lesson is, take a metaphorical chair and sit yourself in that chair metaphorically. And if what you're about to say and do, if you're sitting in that chair and you do not like, your gut is telling you that it's wrong what you're about to say, it's wrong what you're about to do, then my advice is quite simply, don't do it. And you could be qualified to whatever level in employment law, but ultimately it's your own integrity, it's your own gut feeling. If it feels wrong, then it's wrong. Reach out and ask for help. And the second thing that I want to look at is an organisation's environment and vibe, the culture. It's powerful enough to make or break a work experience. So looking at the norms, norms consist of expectations of how people will behave in various situations. So John talked about me being there 3 months. Believe it or not, John, I'm there nearly 4 months now. It feels like 4 days, but it's actually 4 months. And I had an expectation when I came in to DLDC of how I would be treated. And I hope Eamon doesn't mind me saying, and I have singled Eamon out before, but I'm sure most of you have come across Eamon. But I remember going through the recruitment process, and Eamon was one of the first people that I met in the recruitment process when he did a meet and greet before my interview. And I'm quite happy to say that, you know, Eamon's behaviours and my expectations of how I expected to be met and greeted at that recruitment stage, they were hugely met. A really friendly environment to come into, and definitely a part of my decision to join DLDC. So you can never, ever, ever underestimate that first contact in your organisation. Who is that first point of contact, and how does that play in the journey of somebody coming into your organisation, whether it's a visitor, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's a staff member, whoever that might be. So I would like you to look at yourselves and ask yourselves in your organisation, what is the norm? You know, what are our current practices? Have we never really took the time to sit down and look at them? Have we never had the time? What I would say to that is, make the time. Okay, it's really important that you make the time to look at it. Are there any guidelines and handbooks in place, for example? Are there volunteer agreements in place in terms of defining what that volunteer relationship is like, what the parameters of that relationship is like? What are unacceptable behaviours? How do we manage this, or do we turn a blind eye? Do we just say, well, I don't really want to address that, it's too difficult, oh, I might offend somebody by saying that? Or, you know, is it through that lack of knowledge and confidence that we don't address those behaviours? How do we manage it? These are rhetorical questions for you to ask yourselves. Then every person at an organisation should know this. What is my purpose in this organisation? How well do I know what is expected of me? Then us as leaders, as managers, as governing bodies, we should ask ourselves, how well do our people understand what is expected of them? How well do our people know how their work contributes to the organisation? So when I'll talk at the end about the DLDC journey, but we've just started a pilot journey in DLDC, what we call our DLDC talent cycle, and I'm happy to share and talk about that as we move through. And thirdly, and this is not to scare anybody, but this is my HR head in terms of, you know, yes, we're looking at staff, yes, we're looking at volunteers, and I want to talk about that as we go through this, but we need to understand our responsibilities to our staff and volunteers. Organisations in the community and voluntary sector, let me just see, somebody coming in, organisations in the community and voluntary sector, even small groups, can be highly complex in terms of the people agenda. What do I mean by that? So in the voluntary and community sector, you have paid and unpaid roles, you have temporary and permanent roles, you have part-time roles, you have full-time roles, you have individuals who belong to an organisation, you have individuals who are funded by departments. There are questions along, you know, who is my employer? You know, who am I employed by? Who gets a say in what I do? You know, who is that managing body? Okay. So in terms of our people responsibilities and in terms of the time that we have, I've just thrown up a few things for consideration. So firstly, team size does not matter. And you've heard me saying that a few along the way. So sometimes organizations think, oh, well, sure, it doesn't matter. I have one person. It doesn't matter whether that one person's on an employment contract, whether they're a volunteer. You have a duty of care. We have a duty of care as employers, as community organizations. We have a duty of care to look after those people. And what I mean by that is we are vicariously liable through our own actions, whether we're employees, whether we have governing bodies. Governing bodies are vicariously liable. So if, for example, you have employees and a volunteer is mistreated or a fellow employee is mistreated, then we can't ignore that. We should have policies and procedures in place to communicate how that individual can air their voice, have their voice. We need our people to understand, well, what is it if I have a problem? Who do I go to? Who do I talk to? Or does it just stop there? And you might think, God, this is about OTT for a charity shop or a community centre. Well, it's not. It's not. It's very important that people have a voice. Accountability for all. So accountability for ourselves, calling it out ourselves, looking at ourselves and going, yeah, I need to do some work here. Maybe after today, maybe give you some food for thought. Who line manages the volunteers? You know, who do they report to on a day-to-day basis? How does that work? You know, if they don't turn up, for example, someday, is that okay? Or, you know, do you question that? You know, is there something, you know, do you do a check on them? Do you do a next of kin check, for example, if they haven't shown up for a couple of days? What does that look like? And then the governing bodies that we have, what is their role? You know, they have a role to play in this as well. And what does that look like? And then effective organizations have common goals, values, and they celebrate diverse teams. They celebrate diverse teams in terms of their thoughts, in terms of their recruitment, in terms of their working patterns. And I had a look at a few kind of examples of, well, who has, according to the World Wide Web, the perfect culture in their organizations. So in terms of global companies, Twitter are held up, Google, obviously, Facebook are held up as well too. And a lot of it's to do with these funky workspaces and environments that they have, and these very flexible policies around working and everything else. And a lot of it can be benefit driven, and they're very, they have a lot of money and they can do that. Thompson's is held up as, you know, as an employer of choice, for example, a culture that is amazing, you know, birthday days off, you know, recognizing that people have families and what does that look like, and people can actually align themselves to take some time off. I think somebody's off mute there. If, I can't see it. Just if somebody wants to go on mute, just there's maybe a little bit of noise in the background. And then in Ireland, there are a few organisations that are called Great Places to Work in 2021. So recognised as great places. So IRFU is one of them. CPL Ireland, Woody's. There's some case studies there in Woody's. Tato Snacks is another, for example. And then health and safety. We all have that health and safety responsibility, and none more so than now in the COVID, during working through COVID, coming out the other end of COVID environment. So that health and safety responsibility in terms of making sure our due diligence checks are done, making sure our audits are done in our workplaces, making sure that we're COVID secure and responsible as well. And then legislation. So there's a few pieces of legislation. You could talk about it all day and the different protected characteristics, but the equal status, making sure that people, you know, we have a Human Rights Act that was enacted in 2014, that people are treated equally, that there's non-discriminatory practices, whether those people are volunteers or whether they're employees or whether they belong to the organisation or not, that those people have clearly defined roles and responsibilities, each and every one of us. And then the final one is something that if you're ever to be called up in terms of not, you know, treating our people properly, and you say, well, I'm sorry, Mr. WRC adjudicator, I'm sorry, Mr. Labour Court or Mrs. Labour Court judge, what they will tell you is that ignorance of law is no excuse. By the very nature of you taking people into your organisation, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So it didn't scare you. So what I would, just to wind up and to close up, a few suggestions. So I always believe in reflection and evaluating. Evaluate your own work environment, your own community organisation, your own voluntary organisation. And happy to share this presentation with you, but just a few headers that maybe you want to look at. Look at your retention. Do you have people there long term? If you do, great. If you're turning staff with short service, there's something wrong. There's definitely something wrong with your engagement. If you have people leaving en masse, there's something wrong. And then the attraction. Do you find it difficult for people to come into your charity shop or your community centre or your organisation? And if it is difficult and you're reaching out and you can't get people, then is there a bit of PR piece out there in the community that's saying don't work there? Okay. And then look at reward and recognition. Do we recognise, do we say thanks to our people? Do we just expect them to do it and just say, oh, sure, well, they've done their job, sure, that's it? Or do we actually say, thank you very much for a good day's work? Do you have clear mission and vision and values? And if you do, then there shouldn't be any office politics or the rumour mill. And if there are office politics or rumour mill, talk about that. What does that look like? Why is it? Look at what's gone before. Look at what's current. How do you address that? How do you diminish that rumour mill and those office politics? What about a philosophy of transparency? Is there secrecy? Why is there secrecy? Does there need to be secrecy? And there is a certain level of protocol in organisations that need to be adhered to, but everybody should know what our common goals and understanding and objectives are. So personal and professional development. You heard Siobhan there. I mean, what a great initiative. The recognition of prior learning and up to QQI level 6. Amazing. I mean, how easy is that to reach out to Siobhan and to actually encourage, accreditation for our volunteers? Amazing work, and our staff. So, do we encourage that, or do we see that as something that it's over there and we'll deal with it another day? And then looking at our own leadership, our governments, looking at our teams, are they accessible? Are they visible? Are they involved? Are they doing the job on the tin? Are they doing what they should be doing, for example, in terms of contributing to the organisation? And then looking at that diversity piece, diversity in hiring, diversity in our thought process in an organisation, and diversity in approach. So me, for example, coming outside the third sector, that diverse piece of, oh, she's not from the third sector, but that's okay, we'll bring her in. Are we open to that, or are we saying, oh no, you have to be, from this area, you have to be from that particular sector? And then finally, you might think it's not important, but it's very important, our workspaces. So we talk about this COVID environment, and I know that's not possible, for example, for retail, and we need people, and for example, in retail working, but what does that rota pattern look like? What does hybrid working look like? Does everybody really have to come into the office now that we've done it, work through COVID? Or are we just making people's lives hard by requesting them to come back into the office or the organisation or the centre? Or could they really work a couple of days from home? Okay, so just some food for thought. So that's me, and thank you for listening. And what I'll do is stop sharing, and happy to take questions. Hopefully you find that okay.
Thank you, Isobel. That was really interesting. It's yeah, you're 4 months in DLDC, and it's amazing how quickly the time goes, isn't it? So no, I suppose it's interesting, and it's always good, I suppose, to hear that perspective on how important it is, no matter how small the team is, that the team has a culture and that there's kind of an understanding and an accepted set of norms, because I think it is something that probably gets pushed down the list when we're working on projects and we're working on different initiatives and stuff like that. But it is something we always have to maintain, because ultimately happy staff and happy volunteers is what will carry the organization on in the long term. Everything else is fairly fluid, but if people are enjoying what they're doing and feeling rewarded and feeling thanked for it, it makes it a lot easier for everybody going forward. Interesting as well that, good organizational culture will do away with office politics and the rumor mill. my God, it would want to be some culture. But anyway, to try and get rid of those things, yeah, I think it would be a staff of one, but
Point taken, but it diminishes it to a great extent if there is, if it takes away that grey area, if you like, and the answers are there, and and the information's there, it's in the ether. It definitely drives that down, and I suppose the more as we move across, like we're in 2021 now, the environment is so litigious as well now. People, and rightly so, people are so aware of their rights. Again, I'll go back to the teenagers' minds are in their 20s, but my God, are they aware of their rights, in terms of, and so that younger generation coming through as well. I was talking to somebody in community employment last week, was out and about, and was chatting to them, and they were saying how hard it is to get some, the younger generation to come in and actually even do the physical kind of work that's needed, and in community employment or whatever at the minute. So it's just, everybody's so aware, but it is really important that that our actions and behaviors will have an effect on another, if that makes sense.
No, definitely, very true.
Yeah.
No, so look, I throw it open if anybody has any questions or thoughts or comments for either of our speakers.
I just want to say something about the norms and not taking the time to address them. I just like what you said there, Isabel, make the time.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that, I suppose.
It really is. It really is as simple as that. And another phrase that I've heard over the years, and it's quite, I think Eamon, John, and I see Anne there, and Bridget, they know me. I'm quite a direct person. I can't help it. I'm sorry, guys. But one of the other things is something called sumo. Unless it's really, really, really terrible, and sometimes we have to sumo, which is shut up and move on to address things. So let's get on with it. It's done. Come on, let's go ahead now and sort it out. So there's a bit of that as well too.
No, very true.
All right.
No bother at all. Look, thank you very much to both of you. For everybody else on the call, thank you for attending. It's always good for us to get, I suppose, to have speakers come in to upskill ourselves in the volunteer centre and to be able to share that out. And definitely any groups we're talking to will be mentioning the recognition of prior learning piece to them, and equally asking them maybe a little bit more about their culture and how they see their culture. We've had things in the past where if we would say to groups, if we put out one volunteer and you don't get on with them, that's fine. If we put out 10 and you don't get on with them, then the problem isn't the volunteers anymore. So, but we possibly have nicer language for it now. So thank you for that, Isobel. We have a selection of other events happening, as I was saying, and we will issue you all out with a recording of today's sessions. And if Siobhan and Isobel could provide their presentation, or provide your contact, or provide your presentation or your contact details, or whatever it is you want for people to follow up, that would be fantastic. So, Gramila Maiga Valik, and we'll talk to you all soon. Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, John, Eamon.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All the best, folks.
All right, Slanish.